Welcome back, guys, to Detective's Diary. In today's episode, I'm sharing 8 true disturbing stories about the Appalachian Mountains. Ever wonder what it means when a red cloth appears near your tent and you didn't put it there? Or why a fire tower might not be the safest place to sleep even when you're 30 FT off the ground? So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, share this with your friends, and let me know where you're watching from. Thanks. Now, let's get into it. I'm James. I was 26 when I decided I needed a break from absolutely everything and everyone. Not a breakdown, not a midlife crisis, just a full-on mental mute button. So I figured, why not hike part of the Appalachian Trail alone? Not the whole thing, obviously, just a manageable loop about a week long, starting near this tiny town called Elk Ridge in North Carolina, somewhere outside Hot Springs, and curling back down toward a place called Blinn Hollow. It sounded remote enough that I wouldn't run into tourists, but still close enough. To bail if things got weird, I didn't make a big deal out of it, told my boss I was taking time off, dropped a vague line to my sister like, "Hey, going to be off-grid for a bit." And that was it. No Instagram posts, no GPS tracking links, no emotional goodbyes. The last thing I wanted was someone texting me every other day, asking if I'd found myself. I wasn't going out there for that. I wasn't trying to heal. I was just tired, like brain buzzing from fluorescent lights. Tired. I wanted to hear my own thoughts again or better. Yet, no thoughts at all. The first 3 days were exactly what I'd hoped for. Long, quiet stretches of trails, surrounded by thick green. You start to notice weird stuff when you're that deep in the woods, like how many different shades of moss exist or how tree bark feels when you lean your whole body against it. It's like everything gets sharper. I got that kind of good, tired feeling you only get after hiking all day where your legs ache, but in a satisfying way, like they've done something worthwhile. I ate those terrible freeze-dried meals, slept under a tarp, filtered water from streams, saw deer once, and even spotted a bear way off on a distant ridge. It didn't look my way. And I didn't go looking for trouble. I was cautious, overly cautious. Honestly, bear bag hung it every night. Fire safety, nailed it. Checked maps, used landmarks, marked emergency spots. I had backup plans for my backup plans. That kind of structure is comforting. When you're alone out there made me feel like I was in control. Night 4 is when everything turned. I set up camp in this hollow north of Devil's Thread Gap, about 10 mi past the halfway point of my loop. There was a dried-up creek bed nearby in a clearing with enough rocks to serve as a natural windbreak. I remember thinking it was a perfect spot. I boiled water, tore open a bag of powdered lasagna, still disgusting, and sat on a half-rotted log, flipping through a book on my phone. I had just started to relax when it hit me. The smell. It was instant, sharp chemical, like a mix of blood and battery acid, with a hint of something rotten underneath. Not just bad wrong. You know how your brain kind of tugs at your instincts when it detects danger before you logically process it. That's what this was. I thought maybe some animal had died nearby, so I got up and did a slow sweep of the area. I looked under brush, climbed a bit to check the slope above, checked near the tree line. Nothing, no carcass, no buzzards, no scratch marks or tracks. Not even disturbed leaves. It was just still, too still. I didn't waste time after that shove. The food down, double-check my bear hang, zip myself into the tent before sunset. Sometime after midnight, I heard the steps. They were slow, even one step at a time, through dry leaves and twigs. Not frantic, not animal-like. I've heard raccoons, foxes, even deer crunching through the woods. This wasn't that. This was deliberate. I sat up in my sleeping bag completely still. I wasn't breathing, just listening. The steps moved around the tent once, just once, a perfect circle. Then they stopped directly behind my head. No rustling, no flashlight, no voice, just silence. I didn't unzip, didn't even twitch. I was holding a knife. Under my sleeping bag, fingers cramped around the handle so hard my hand went numb. I waited. I think I stayed like that, until the sky turned gray and the birds started up again in the morning. I checked the ground behind the tent. There were prints. Not mine. The soles were almost completely smooth, like old-school leather shoes, and the toe pointed inward slightly, like the person's feet were turned in that small detail that messed with me. I don't know why, but it did. It felt off, like something was wrong with the way whoever it was moved. I packed up fast, didn't eat, didn't even stretch, just started walking and didn't stop until my legs were screaming. I skipped my next planned sight, ignored my brakes, and only stopped long enough to slam water and keep moving. And the smell followed me. It came in waves, sometimes faint, sometimes stronger, like rust and rot. And something else, something sweet, almost syrupy, like spoiled fruit. It didn't make sense. Nothing dead follows you for 10 miles that night, I found. A spot high on a ridge. The trees were sparse, and I could see out in all directions. I thought it might make me feel safer. It didn't. I didn't make a fire, didn't cook. I crawled into the tent and held that same knife in my hand, like it was glued there, then around 2 arteries. I woke up again, breathing slow, steady, human breathing, coming from just outside the tree-line, not moving, not panting, just watching. Then the steps started again, crunch, crunch, no circling. This time, they came straight toward the tent. I saw the silhouette, a tall, lean shape, backlit by moonlight. It was holding something, a stick, no longer, more like a staff, or maybe a pole. He stood just outside the tent and tapped it once, that's all, just one knock, like someone tapping their finger on a window. Then he turned and walked away. The smell clung to the tent long after he left. I didn't sleep after that. I didn't even sit down. When the sun came up, I packed up in 10 minutes and followed a shortcut I'd marked on my map, a maintenance road that would eventually lead toward the highway around late afternoon, barely able to move my legs anymore. I stumbled across this old hunting shack, barely standing, 3 walls, half a roof, rotting wood. I ducked inside just to catch my breath. That's when I saw the carvings. Dozens of names scratched into the wood above the doorway, some initials, some full names. Every single one had a date, some from the ads, some newer. The most recent was from 3 days earlier. Underneath that name was a blank space. It wasn't even subtle, just an obvious empty spot, like it was waiting for the next one. I sat there, knife still in hand, heart trying to punch through my ribs. I stayed the whole night in that shack. Didn't sleep, just listened every time something cracked outside. I was sure it was him again, waiting for dark, but he never came back. As soon as it was light, I took off down the road. I walked until I saw a ranger truck, probably looked like I'd crawled out of a cave. The ranger asked if I was okay. I told him I saw a bear got turned around trying to avoid it. He didn't press when I got home. I sold all my gear, maps, boots, even my water filter haven't hiked, since I used to think I was pretty good in the woods. I mean, I wasn't some wilderness expert or anything, but I camped, I hiked, I didn't freak out over every snapping twig. So when my cousin Ben invited me out to his family's place near Waverly, Virginia, for a week last August, I didn't think twice. They had this big log cabin, way out past the edge of anything resembling civilization. No neighbors, no cell signal, no ambient light. From town, just endless trees behind it, like the forest started where their yard ended and kept going into forever. Ben and I grew up spending summers together, even after college started. We'd kept the tradition going. We were both 20 now, technically adults, but when we got together, It was still the same old dumb jokes, the same competitions over who could eat more gas station snacks or whose college was more soul-crushing. We were a few days into the visit when boredom hit no Wi-Fi, no girls, and only so much Mario Kart you can play before you start getting existential. That's when Ben brought up the fire tower. "There's one way up past Ridgeoint Bluff," he said, just kind of throwing it out there, while we were halfway through a grilled cheese lunch. It's like 3 miles and super sketchy, but it's still standing. You can see the whole county from the top. I paused with a bite halfway to my mouth. "You've been up there once? Sophomore year? We did a night hike. Whole thing freaked me out. Not going to lie, but also kind of awesome." I raised an eyebrow. "Night hike through unmarked woods." "Yeah, that sounds like a no from me." Ben shrugged. "Come on, man. We've done dumber stuff. I brought headlamps. It'll be fun. We can camp on the platform, make some food, do the whole wilderness bonding thing." I hesitated, but only for a second. He had a point. We had done dumber stuff. Plus, I didn't want to be the guy who backed out of something that sounded kind of epic. So we packed up around 8:30 that evening. Ben loaded up the bare essentials: 2 cheap sleeping bags, a tiny camp stove, some instant ramen, a beat-up tent. Just in case, I threw in 2 flashlights, my lighter, a bottle of water, and the folding knife my uncle gave me for graduation. Just having that knife made me feel slightly better about walking into the unknown. We left just before 9. The sun was mostly down, but there was still a sliver of light in the sky, enough to make out shapes. The trail, or what Ben claimed was a trail, started off behind his backyard and immediately ducked into a tunnel of trees. It was narrow, uneven, the kind of path you only find because a few deer stomped it flat. Over the years, every few steps I had to dodge branches or step over half-buried roots. One tripped me so bad I almost ate dirt. 5 minutes in, should have worn chinoirs. I muttered. Ben just laughed and kept walking. Welcome to nature's gym. After the first 15 minutes, we barely spoke. The woods were unnerving. I hadn't realized how used to noise I was until I noticed the lack of it. No crickets, no frogs, not even the hum of mosquitoes. Just our footsteps and the occasional swish of leaves when we brushed past something. It felt like we were underwater, everything muffled. Then we passed this rusted old truck. It was tilted sideways against a tree, like it had been dropped there by a crane. The windows were shattered, moss growing over the hood vines, crawling through the busted grill. Ben nodded at it. "That's been there forever. Some logging truck, I think, lost a wheel. Nobody ever hauled it out. We joked that it looked like the beginning of every horror movie ever made, the kind where the camera zooms in on a weird object, and you just know someone's about to die." About half an hour later, we found something hanging from a tree branch. At first I thought it was just a decoration, like those tin can wine chimes some people make, but when we got close, I realized it was bones. Small ones, probably from birds or rodents. They were strung together with bits of old twine, a few dirty feathers tied in, and smudged red paint on the bigger pieces. I stared at it, not getting any closer. "What the hell is this?" Ben squinted. "Locals leave stuff like this supposed to be protection symbols, some kind of folk ritual. My dad told me about it once, Appalachian witchcraft stuff. I didn't like how it spun. There was no wind, but it slowly rotated, like something unseen was nudging it, watching us or pointing. We kept going, and the further in we got, the more it felt like we'd crossed into some place we weren't supposed to be by the time we spotted the fire tower. It was past midnight. It rose out of the treetops like a rusted skeleton, all iron beams and missing pieces. The base was surrounded by overgrown brush, and the stairs were clearly not up to code. Some steps were completely missing, others bent like soda cans. I looked at Ben. You sure this thing's going to hold us?" He grinned only one way to find out. We climbed slowly, carefully grabbing onto the railings like we were scaling a jungle gym. A few steps crunched under our weight, and I had to leap over one gap that made my stomach twist. But eventually we reached the top. The platform was warped, metal grating, bent in weird angles. The little hut at the top, probably where rangers used to sit, was still standing, but it smelled like mold and something worse. Maybe a raccoon lived in it. Now we didn't check. Instead, we rolled out our sleeping bags on the open platform, cooked some ramen, and stared at the stars. It actually felt kind of magical for a bit. No noise, no distractions, just the two of us in the sky. Then I heard it. A soft crunch down below. Not a squirrel, not a raccoon. Something heavy. Ben's flashlight flicked off instantly. "Don't move," he whispered. We both froze. Step, pause, step, pause. It circled the tower once, then again. Slow. Deliberate, no talking, no rustling, like it was looking for something. Just those footsteps pacing. I didn't breathe. My heart hammered in my ears. I counted the steps in my head. 12, 13, 14, then silence. I don't know how long we stayed. Like that could have been 10 minutes or an hour. Eventually I started breathing again, told myself it was just some hunter or another hiker who saw our lights. At some point, I must have nodded off, but when I woke up, something felt off. Ben's sleeping bag was empty. Bill zipped open the way he left it. I sat up. Ben. No answer. I got up and crept to the edge of the platform, shined my light downward. There was someone standing at the base. Not Ben. The thing was tall, thin. The arms hung wrong too long, like they didn't know where they were supposed to go. The head tilted, not like someone looking up, but like it was broken. The whole body looked distorted, stretched out. Then I heard Ben's voice. It came from the trees. "Josh, I need help, too." Clear, no emotion, like someone playing back a sound file. Then it said it again. Same exact words, same exact tone. "Josh, I need help." I stumbled back. My hands were shaking. I didn't even realize I'd pulled my knife out. The figure below didn't move. Then it started climbing. Not the stairs, the beam's hands, grabbing the iron supports, limbs, bending in ways that didn't make sense. No sound, just motion. I turned, heart racing. The stairs behind me were gone, half collapsed. No escape that way. The thing was halfway up. Then I heard it again. "Josh," but this time I knew it was Ben. Real voice, real breath behind it. The thing stopped, then dropped. Just let go, like its strings were cut. I rushed to the edge. Nothing. It was gone. Seconds later, Ben crashed out of the trees below, face pale, flashlight jerking in his hand. "Go!" he screamed. "We have to go the stairs!" I started, slide down, use the beams. I didn't think I grabbed the nearest support pole, swung out, and dropped hit the dirt, and slid halfway down the slope before Ben caught me. We didn't speak, just ran barreled. Through the trees, like animals, branches tearing at us. I don't know how long we ran hours. Maybe we made it back around dawn when we reached the cabin. Ben slammed the door behind us and locked it. Only then did he talk. He said he got up to pee and saw something. At first he thought it was me, but it moved wrong, jerky, like it didn't know how limbs worked. Then it stepped behind a tree and vanished. I was 17. The summer, everything at home blew up. My parents were constantly at each other's throats. Didn't matter what it was. Money dishes, how loud the TV was, who forgot to buy more toothpaste. Every little thing was a full-blown argument. I'd come home from school and just sit in the driveway, sometimes waiting for them to quiet down. But they never did. One night, after a particularly brutal fight that ended with my dad throwing a chair, I texted my mom from my room and said I needed to get away. She didn't even ask where, just said, "Okay, be safe." My Uncle Travis had this off-the-G grid cabin out near Franklin, West Virginia, not even on GPS, middle of nowhere. I'd only been there once when I was a kid. I remembered it being boring, but quiet at that point. Boring. And quiet sounded like heaven. Travis wasn't the warm type. He picked me up from the bus station in silence, chewing sunflower seeds and spitting the shells into an old Gatorade bottle. When we pulled up to the cabin, it looked smaller than I remembered. The wood siding had gone gray. The screen door hung loose at one hinge and made this slapping sound every time the wind caught it. There was a porch swing with only one chain. Inside was just 2 rooms and a bathroom. A wood stove in the corner kitchenette that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. The whole place smelled faintly like old coffee grounds and burnt wood. I noticed a dog bowl by the sink, but there wasn't a dog. Had a mutt years ago, Travis said when he saw me looking. Died bulls, just there, don't follow the carved trees, don't stay out after dark, and don't go west. I waited for a punchline or maybe a reason, got neither. He turned around, lit a cigarette, and that was the end of the conversation. The next few days were just me walking. I didn't have cell service, and Travis didn't own a TV or a radio, so I explored. The woods were thick hills, rolled into other hills, until I couldn't tell which direction I came from. Sometimes I'd stop and just try to listen, but there weren't any real sounds, no birds, no squirrels, nothing rustling. It was like someone pressed mute. And I started noticing bones first. It was just little ones. A bird here, a rabbit there. Then a raccoon with its rib cage showing, always dry, always clean, like something picked them clean and arranged them just off the path. After a while I stopped looking too closely, but the carvings, those messed with me. Random trees would have symbols cut deep into the bark, not initials, or Tom plus Becky Hart's weird stuff, overlapping triangles. Spidery lined circles inside circles. One had what looked like 2 stick figures holding hands, but their heads were X's. A few of them were surrounded by black handprints the size of a 5-year-old's. And the thing is, they moved like I'd see one on a tree during a hike, come back the next day, and it would be gone, or on a different tree entirely. I finally brought it up. What do the symbols mean? I asked over a dinner of eggs and toast that Travis burned on purpose. He didn't look up, just muttered, "Don't touch, don't follow, don't ask again." That was the first full sentence I'd heard from him in days. One morning, I woke up before the sun just couldn't sleep. Figured I'd go farther than usual. I stuffed some jerky and a flashlight in my backpack and started down a narrow path I hadn't noticed before it dipped between 2 trees that were completely dead, like they'd been burned from the inside out. The trail curved weirdly like it was trying to lead me in a circle, but never quite did. Then it opened into this clearing. Right in the middle was a ring of stones, not random rocks placed evenly spaced, perfectly round, maybe 20 ft across. Inside the circle was nothing, no leaves, no grass, not even bugs, just hard-packed dirt, and in the center a tree stump. It was pale, like it had just been cut, but it didn't match any of the trees around it. The cut was too clean, no bark, no jagged edges. It looked wrong, like it didn't belong there. I stepped a little closer, didn't go in. Then I saw the rope. It was hanging down from a high branch, old frayed thick. A noose. It wasn't swinging fast, just slightly, like it had been touched recently. I told myself the wind did it, but there was no breeze. I turned around and someone was there. He was maybe 10 feet away. No shoes, skin like sun-dried beef, shirt stained dark at the collar and down the chest ribs, poking through like a Halloween prop. His eyes were the worst part, pale and unblinking, too wide. He wasn't breathing through his mouth. He was sniffing inhales so deep and slow I could hear them rattle in his chest. His hair hung in greasy strips on both sides of his face and his feet. They weren't on top of the moss. They were in it, like sunk deep toes curled into the ground. All I managed was, "Sorry, I didn't shout. Didn't run immediately, just apologize like I'd walked into the wrong bathroom." He lifted one hand and pointed at the stump. That's when I took off. I ran like I'd never run in my life. Smacked face first into branches. Tree or my palms on rocks. At one point I slid down a hill and landed on my side so hard I thought I cracked a rib. My backpack, ripped, jerky gone, flashlight somewhere behind me. I didn't care. I scrambled up and kept going. The woods felt different, bigger. I couldn't find anything familiar. The trees leaned at strange angles, like they twisted while I wasn't looking. I'd hear birds, then silence, water. Then silence, all was just enough to make me second guesses. What I heard when I finally stumbled back into the clearing near the cabin. The sun was almost down. My shirt was shredded, knees bleeding dirt in my teeth. Travis was waiting on the porch with his shotgun, not aiming it, just holding it like he always did. He looked at me for a second and said, "You stepped into the wrong circle." I said, "How do you know?" He didn't answer that night. We didn't speak. He sat out front. I sat on the couch around 1 hour in the morning. I started hearing the footsteps, not close, just at the edge of the trees, long, slow strides, crunching dry leaves, snapping twigs like they were being broken on purpose. Then the voice came. "Mason," it whispered. I stood up. It sounded exactly like my mom, same tone she used when she couldn't find her keys. "Mason, help me. I'm lost." I walked toward the window. Travis reached in and grabbed my wrist. Hard, shook his head. Once didn't say a word. "Please," the voice said. "Mason, I need you." It was my mom's voice, but drawn out like someone playing a recording through a broken speaker. I opened my mouth to say something. Travis clamped his hand over it. We sat there all night. The voice circled the cabin, switching sides like it was trying to find a way in. At dawn, it stopped when we checked the ground. There were footprints, bare feet, toes spread wide. They circled the cabin, stopped right under my window, then vanished. No trail out. I packed. That afternoon didn't say much. Neither did Travis. He drove me to the bus station right before I got out. He said, "You were lucky." Then he drove off. I never told my parents what really happened. Said I got homesick. They didn't ask for details. 10 years went by. I moved twice, got a decent job in Richmond. Life settled into something that felt normal. The cabin, the woods, they stayed in the back of my head like a dream. You're not sure you actually had. I was 23. The first time I tried solo camping in the Blue Ridge, I'd gone on plenty of weekend hikes before, mostly with friends. Usually somewhere close to home, day trips, or maybe a night out, with a fire, some beers, and too many marshmallows. But those were always half about the trail and half about hanging out. This time was different. I was coming off a rough breakup, had just quit a job I hated. And honestly, I felt stuck. I kept telling people I just needed a break. But I think I was trying to prove to myself I could handle being completely alone. 4 days, no reception, no distractions, just me, my gear, and whatever was out there. The spot I picked was outside this tiny place called Ledger's Gap. It barely shows up on the map, like someone typed it wrong, and no one bothered to fix it. I found it mentioned on a hiker's forum. Some old-timers said it was peaceful and never crowded. That was the whole appeal. I drove up with my car already packed and ready. I'd left my phone on airplane mode, told my sister where I was headed, and brought a printed map from the ranger station just in case. No GPS, no social media. I even packed light, just the basics. Tent water filter, a few freeze-dried meals, my knife, a little first aid kit, and this paperback mystery novel that had been collecting dust for a year when I stopped for gas just outside Ledger's Gap. I asked the clerk if the Firebrush Trail was still accessible. He didn't even look up from the counter, just nodded once and muttered, "Yeah, always open." Or, no smile, no warning. Not even a "be careful, the vibe was off." But I chalked it up to small-town awkwardness. I paid for a bottle of water and drove on. The trail head was basically a gravel patch off a bend in the road. There was a beat-up wooden post with a sun-faded sign that read, "No maintenance beyond this point." No parking lot, no ranger kiosk, no other cars. It looked like the kind of place people forget exists. I locked my car, tightened my pack straps, and stepped onto the trail. The first few miles were beautiful. The path wound between tall trees with mossy trunks and these low shrubs that rustled when I brushed against them. The air smelled like dirt and old leaves. Occasionally, I'd hear a woodpecker or see a squirrel dart through the undergrowth. But otherwise, it was silent, peaceful, but kind of eerie, too. By late afternoon, I'd hiked about 6 miles in and found a patch of flat ground beside a creek. It wasn't an official campsite, but it was perfect, soft soil, no rocks, a clear spot for my tent, and a little slope nearby where I could sit and eat. I set up the tent, filtered some creek water, boiled a pouch of chili over my tiny stove, and sat back on a log with my boots off, watching the stream flow. That first night was completely uneventful. I stayed up reading by headlamp, then crawled into my sleeping bag, and fell asleep to the sound of water trickling and leaves whispering above the tent. The second morning I decided to hike light. There was a rocky overlook marked on the map, about 2 miles further up the ridge. I left the tent in gear, just brought a small day pack with snacks, water, and my map to be safe. I tore up an old red T-shirt into strips and tied one to a branch every 100 yards or so to mark my path. Nothing fancy, just quick little knots, so I wouldn't get turned around the hike up was uneventful, and I didn't pass a single person. The trail narrowed and got steeper the closer I got to the overlook, but eventually I found the rock ledge. The map described the view was pretty stunning. Layers of green stretching in every direction, the treetops blending into one solid wall. I sat on a boulder, pulled out granola and jerky, and listened. No cars, no talking, no planes overhead, just wind and leaves and my own chewing. I stayed for maybe half an hour before heading back. It was around 2 ultra when I got back to my camp, and that's when I saw it. About 20 ft from my tent, tied to a branch at shoulder height, was a strip of red cloth, same color, same fabric. But not one of mine. I walked up to it and immediately noticed the knot was different, tighter, more intentional. Mine were just quick loops. This one looked practiced. The strip was also darker, like it had been wet or maybe dragged through the dirt. I stood there for a long minute, just staring at it, trying to convince myself I'd maybe tied it and forgot, but that didn't make sense. I hadn't been near this part of the camp during my hike. I'd tied the last marker way up the ridge. I checked all my original markers again, retraced the first part of the trail back toward the overlook. All mine were still there. This one didn't match the pattern. It hadn't been there that morning. I didn't eat dinner that night. I zipped myself inside the tent as soon as the sun dipped, knife within reach, and just lay there listening. Every rustle outside felt louder than it should have. Every shift of wind made me flinch, but nothing came. Nothing touched the tent. I didn't sleep much. By morning I'd made a decision. The ranger map mentioned a primitive shelter cabin about 8 miles deeper into the forest. I figured if someone was messing with me, they wouldn't expect me to head farther. In the cabin had 4 walls, maybe even a lock, and possibly an old ranger radio. I packed only what I needed and set out early, about 2 hours in the forest. Started to feel different. Not ominous exactly, just still, like everything had hit mute. The birds stopped. Even my own footsteps seemed quieter. That's when I heard it, movement ahead quick. Light steps, too soft for a deer, too smooth to be a raccoon. I stopped, called out, "Hello," nothing. The trail split about 50 yards ahead. The left side climbed sharply up a ridge, the right dropped into a thicker part of the valley. I stood there trying to decide which way the map wanted me to go. Then I saw it on a branch, just up the left path, was another red strip of cloth. Same knot as the one near my tent. Same placement. I didn't hesitate. I turned right and kept moving. I didn't stop again, didn't check the map. I just wanted walls around me. The shelter was barely standing. A single-room wooden shack with a dented tin roof and a crooked door that screamed when I opened it. Inside it smelled like wood smoke and rodent droppings. There was an old shelf with a rusty can of beans, a broken broom, and a pile of leaves in the corner, but it had a bolt on the door and a solid wall to lean against. I shut myself inside, lit a candle, and sat with my back against the wall knife in hand. I didn't read, I didn't eat. I just listened. Sometime after midnight I heard it, 2 slow knocks on the outer wall. Not, wind not, branches, knuckles. I held my breath. Few minutes later the door creaked just a little enough to hear the wood strain, like someone had pressed their weight against it, then let go. That was it. I waited for hours. Nothing else happened. When the sky started to lighten, I shoved everything in my pack and bolted. I didn't stop to lace my boots properly. I didn't eat. I ran nearly 10 miles straight, barely looking at the trail when I reached the trailhead. My car was still there. I leaned against it, gasping, staring back at the trees like something might follow me out. As I pulled out onto the road, I passed the old Ledger's Gap, welcome sign nailed to the post I'd barely noticed. When I first arrived by October, I ended up in western North Carolina, rolling green hills and forest. As far as I could see, I started in state parks, but once the weather cooled and the weekend crowds thinned, I began slipping off the beaten paths. Fewer people meant more breathing room one misty afternoon. I stopped at a lone gas station, just a pump out by a highway curve, looking for tips on hidden trails. The clerk, a guy with a friendly half-mile, told me about an old place just off the Blue Ridge Parkway. He said, "Not many folks go out there in a way that suggested both caution and rural treasure." That was enough for me. I pulled into the trailhead late on a Friday, gravel, a sagging sign big enough to suggest maps, and just one other vehicle, a red Subaru with a cracked taillight, and a dull rescue dogs don't shop sticker on the bumper. Dust coated the hood. It looked abandoned. I shrugged, parked nearby, and started loading my pack. The path was steep for the first mile or so, just enough to remind me what gravity feels like. Then it rolled into winding switchbacks, deep amid hickory and oak underbrush, tangled like old rope. With every step the world grew quieter, like pressing a mute switch on life. Bird song softened. Wind turned respectful, and even the forest smells became subtle. No cars, no planes, just trees and meat. I hiked until I found a flat spot by a trickling stream, perfect for camp. The air felt crisp on my face, but not freezing. I made ramen on my little stove, stared up at stars that felt closer than usual, and felt that sweet hush of the woods wrap around me. Then came midnight. I snapped upright. No. Rustling. No one shouting my name, just an instant jolt that dropped me into alert mode. My tent walls were still. I barely dared to move. Then I heard it, tentative steps. not like little critters, but heavy enough, like a person crackling leaves 20 feet away. One deliberate step after another, then pause, crackle pause. Again, silence. Maybe 5 minutes later, I cracked open the tent just enough to peek. Nothing moved. I could have sworn a shadow flickered, but maybe it was a trick of moonlight. Didn't smell anything wild. No growl or scuffing, just a slow, deliberate walk around my sight. I zipped back up and convinced myself it was a raccoon, or maybe a bear being extra cautious. I've heard bears lumber around. They grunt. They sniff. This felt too light-footed, too human. Morning came with cold air in the tent. I moved quickly, packing with one hand while the other held my coffee, half-cooked noodles sloshing in the pot. I didn't wait for it to cool. I just shoved the lot into my pack and headed deeper into the woods, aimed for quieter and farther from anyone else. It was later I found a mossy clearing with a forgotten fire-ring stones, so blackened they looked like relics swallowed by green. I felt a drop of relief. I sat up, ate jerky from the bag crinkling in my lap, and scribbled in my journal about how quiet out here is. Weird, simple thoughts like I was writing to a friend who'd get it. Then the sun started to dip. I walked 20 feet out from the clearing just to gather dead branches for a fire. That's when I froze between the trees. Someone was standing there. No footsteps, no snap brush signal. They were just there upright watching, tall enough to be an adult man. I stopped breathing. My mouth got dry. I thought maybe they were lost, maybe looking for a campsite, but I called out, "Hey, Lea Oinkais," and got nothing. They barely moved when I took a step back. Just a tiny shift, like shifting weight. No wave, no nothing. Just a still human shape. So I turned, heart hammering, walked straight back, not quickly but with purpose. I packed up that camp by flashlight, knife in my hand, headlamp by my pillow. I don't think I slept more than a few scattered minutes. Every snap of twig or a gusted leaf had me sitting upright by dawn. I stuffed everything into my pack, no time for coffee or sitting, and retraced my steps fast. The trail felt off. Now shadows looked wrong. Rocks, I remembered, looked gone. I kept checking over my shoulder 2 miles from the parking area. I stopped. The Subaru was there, but not where I left it. It was off the trail, stationary, tucked between 2 tree trunks, like someone had driven it in and abandoned it. The hood dusted with pine needles, more dust than when I left, a window cracked open. I walked all the way around, no footprints heading into or out of the woods, no campsite. The interior was empty, no stove, no sleeping pads, no gear, just a gray air freshener hanging low and a dark dried smear on the back seat fabric. My chest tightened. I swung around and took off down the trail, breathing hard, pumping arms. I didn't stop until I hit the lot. My van was exactly where I left it. Doors locked, no weirdness around it, but that suffocating feeling hadn't lifted. I revved the engine, drove out without even thinking where I was going. A couple hours, and I ended up in a cheap motel fluorescent, lights front desk behind glass. I gave them a fake name, paid cash, and checked-in room smelled like cheap cleanser, but I didn't care. I checked the lock, shoved a chair under the doorknob, and curled up with my knife on the nightstand. I don't know what woke me, somewhere around 3 but there was a slow, dragging scratch outside concrete or maybe asphalt, like boots, like someone pacing. I sat up, ears ringing. Crawled across the bed to the peephole. A man stood there facing away, staring at the tree end behind the motel, tall gray hoodie drenched at the bottom, boots, heavy, looking caked, knee-deep in mud. No bag, no car, no flashlight. He didn't shift for 10 minutes, just watched. Then he turned and walked into the darkness. My heart thudded. I sat on the floor with a knife in lap. I didn't sleep again by sunrise. I was gone, didn't even unlock the door. drove until headlights and billboards and buzz replaced silence until cell phone bars popped up, until I didn't feel like I was followed, even though I know I probably was. I never went back. I never asked about that. Subaru. I used to go hiking almost every other weekend. There is something peaceful about being alone in the woods. No buzzy notifications, no cars, no people asking you for directions or small talk. The trails behind Bell Ridge. Hollow, West Virginia felt like my secret edge of the world, quiet, wild, tiny. I'd park the car by an old cattle gate, think sagging metal chain, dangling slap on my pack, and climb. That day started like any other. It was cool, just enough breeze to take the itch off a spring morning after about 2 hours. The logging road split into a fork. It looked deliberate, almost groomed. I followed the right side. That's when I saw it, a can waist high. Neat stone stacked with an almost OCD precision on top. In the center was a shard of red glass, lying flat like an eye staring up at me. I walked in circles around it, peering at the glass, while turning it over in my head. Made no sense. No trail marker, no sign. Just that strange glass, glaring, almost angry. Whatever I thought, keep moving. 30 minutes later, I hit another, identical. Karen. Except this time, sap was dripping down one side like syrup, slow and glistening. It looked like it was crying. That image almost stuck me in place. I just stared, then told myself, sap gunk up rocks, nothing supernatural here. Branches rustled overhead, and I scanned the trees, half expecting someone or something to appear. But nothing. I found a flat spot in a dry stream bed and sat the gravel under me, poked through my shorts, but it was flat and easy to reach. I broke a granola bar first, bits of oats honey, the works, then chewed on some beef jerky. I looked down at my GPS watch. It was frozen. It said I was back near the road from 30 minutes ago, full bars. No glitch, reason on purpose. I rebooted it. It sputtered back to life, pinned me living in the present again. But after that, the forest felt sharper edges, more defined. Every twig snap sounded louder. Branches creaked even when the wind wasn't moving. I zipped my jacket up and walked faster than I meant to. It didn't take long to find cairn number 3. No red glass this time. Instead, someone had tied a strip of old flannel around the base rock. A faded red and blue pattern. It looked like the shirts miners wore back in the 930 seam. I remember seeing photos in the Bell Ridge Museum. I crouched to touch it. Just then, snap a branch cracked loud behind me like a gunshot. I spun around nothing. I could feel my heart slamming in my chest. I didn't need to check my watch to know the time. It was close to 2:15 p. That dead zone of afternoon. When the sun feels heavy, I stuffed my tracker into my pocket and walked on. My plan was to hit that ridge and then head back. But just past a clump of old oaks, the ground dropped out. I slipped into this hollow that didn't exist on my map. It felt wet, heavy, like rain had soaked everything. There, though, the rest of the trail was dry. I felt trapped, unnaturally, moved. I picked my way down using deer trails. They're stealthy by design, silent and instinctual. But the deeper I went, the weirder it got. Moss clung to rocks and thick mats. Some stones looked carved angles, so sharp you'd think a sculptor worked on them. That's when I saw it, a cabin. I'd been in old cabins before, but this one was different. The roof was coated in dark soot like it had smoked a campfire for decades. Windows so filthy they looked like mirrors at midnight. No glass, just grime, no smoke from a chimney. Nothing but the footprints stopped me. One pair clear deep. You could almost see the arch imprint. Someone had been there recently. I wish I'd turned around then, but I didn't. I crept to the back behind it. Someone had put up crosses in a muddy patch, 7-9 hard to count. Each was just sharp, splintery wood with a little pile of stones on top. Sloppy sap dripped down, some of them still wet, and the red glass, it was buried into the dirt around each cross. It looked ceremonial, like someone had planted it there, arranged it. I wished I could unsee it. It got worse, a dog at least. I thought it was a dog at first. It looked like a sculpture carved from a tree stump, but I swear it moved. Took a step, raised its head. Its legs were too skinny, too long like a dog, drawn by someone who had never seen one. Its muzzle was stiff and unblinking. It stared at me. I froze. My blood pounded. I swear it tilted its head as though it was curious, and then it turned and just disappeared into the trees. No bark, no rustle, just gone. I turned and ran. Every direction looked wrong. Trees and rocks blurred. I retraced steps or tried. Then I saw it the first cairn. Again, same spot. But the top rock was gone. In its place was a circle of teeth. Human teeth arranged like a wreath, some big, some small, pretty polished, like someone scrubbed them clean. I closed my eyes and puked in the leaves. I screamed into the woods rain. No, just my own voice. Then I ran harder. My GPS was dead again. I dug my phone out and tried calling for help, but it died after one ring. No signal. I didn't care. I just ran downhill until my lungs burned. My legs burned. I didn't stop until I reached the logging gate. A stump sat nearby on it. My boots, not mine, but identical, shiny, empty, with a puddle of water inside each one, clean water. I didn't get it. There was something else, though, a Polaroid half stuck in the left boot. I pulled it out slowly. My hand shook so bad. I folded the boot over and spilled the water out to steady myself. The photo was me eating lunch in that stream bed from behind exactly where I'd been hours ago. No shutter noise, no trail of sound, just whoever or whatever had watched me. I dropped the photo and ran. My car was at the gate. When I got there, I opened the door and jumped in, but it felt like I should still be hiking. I grabbed the keys and missed the ignition twice before it caught. I didn't check my mirrors. I just slammed it into gear and bolted down the gravel road. Loose stones kicked up behind me like rain. 10 miles later, I pulled into this roadside diner wood paneling, inside dusty booze, single bulb lights hanging low. I sat and just stared at the coffee they brought me. My hands shook the mug, so it clanked against the saucer the waitress wrote on the pad with a pen that squeaked. She asked if I was okay. I gurgled, "I need a ride," and didn't say another word. Not about the teeth, not about the cabin, not about that dog that night. I scrubbed everything, boots, packed clothes, until the washer and dryer sounded ready to explode. I double-keyed every lock, left lights on all night. I kept the blinds shut. I couldn't sleep. I dozed. Watching my front door, waiting for proof I judged wrong. Waiting for someone or something to peek through the darkness. 2 days later, the mailbox photo showed up. Same stream bed shot, closer frame, filled with me. My face, my shirt, my bag, like they were aimed in. It wasn't background noise or a random point, and it was deliberate and paused. I didn't open it. I just stared at it. That was the last straw. I packed a box that night. 2 weeks later, I sold Bellage Hollow and moved on. Now I only hike marked trails, parks with other people. If I come across a can that isn't on a trail sign, I leave. I stumbled across a weird post on this old hiking forum. It was buried deep in a thread about abandoned trails. No capitalization, just a long, messy rant about a cave system somewhere near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. It didn't give coordinates or anything useful. Just some blurry photos of a rusty chain-link fence half hidden in vines on a ridge behind what the poster claimed was an old ranger station. But it was the last line that stuck with me. It said, "Turn around if you hear clicking. Don't keep going. I'm serious." Oh, that sentence crawled into my brain and stayed there. At first, I saved the post just because it was bizarre, but over the next few weeks, I found myself coming back to it wondering if maybe, just maybe, it was real. By the time June rolled around. I had a week off work, and zero plans curiosity had fully sunk its teeth into me. So I packed my gear, headlamp backup, flashlight, knife string, snacks, a bivy sack, and made the 6-hour drive into the mountains. I camped out near a fire road just off the grid enough that my phone turned into a paperweight. No signal, no maps. Just me in the trees. The next morning I followed the directions as best I could, using the landmarks mentioned in the post. First came the 2 birch trees that split at the base like a wishbone, then a fork in the creek. I took the left path, finally a long curve in the slope, shaped like a horseshoe that led me right to it. The ranger station looked half swallowed by the forest roof, collapsed door hanging on by a splinter, windows shattered. There was a wooden sign leaning against the wall that read, Crow Hill Ranger Outpost. I hadn't seen it on any of the maps I'd checked before the trip behind the building, past some mossy boulders. I found the fence. It looked exactly like the photo, old, tangled in vines, and bent outward at the bottom, where something or someone had slipped through. So I did the same. I followed what barely qualified as a trail. It wasn't really visible unless you were looking for it, just a shallow line through the undergrowth. The climb took about 40 minutes, no birds, no bugs. The only sound was the crunch of leaves under my boots and my own breathing. It felt like the forest had hit mute. Eventually the ridge narrowed, and I spotted it, a crack in the rock on the north-facing slope. It didn't look like much, just a jagged slit in the limestone. I turned sideways and squeezed through my backpack, catching on the edges inside. It got cold, fast. The air was damp and stale, thick enough that I could almost taste the minerals. I turned on my headlamp and tied one end of my spool of string to a rock near the entrance standard cave. Exploration move. The passage twisted downward and deeper, and after a few turns daylight disappeared completely. After about 20 minutes of careful walking, I came into a wider chamber. My light hit the walls, and I stopped. There were carvings everywhere. Spirals, stick figures, deep gouges. Some of them looked like people, but wrong, arms too long, heads missing, or shaped like circles. One figure had its hands raised toward another. Smaller one, it didn't look like art. It looked like someone trying to record something. I pulled out my phone to snap a picture, lifted it, and my headlamp flickered. I tapped the side, the light steadied. I turned to leave. Then I heard it, just one sharp tap, echoing faintly behind me. Click, click, click. It wasn't water. It wasn't random. There was a rhythm to it, almost like it meant something. I froze for maybe 3 seconds, then slowly started backing toward the entrance. The string still in my hand. I turned my flashlight toward the tunnel behind me, and then the string jerked hard, like someone yanked it from the other end. I let go immediately. The clicking stopped. I waited, breathing hard, straining to hear anything for a moment. There was nothing. Then I caught movement low to the ground fast, just a glimpse. Pale skin, long fingers disappearing around a corner. That was enough. I turned and ran. No thought, just instinct. My light swung wildly, bouncing off walls. Every slope felt steeper. Every turn, tighter. I slipped, landed hard on my side, slid down a rocky incline. My flashlight flew out of my hand and skittered away. I crawled over to it and clicked it on again. My hands were shaking. I was in a smaller chamber, no exit in sight. Then the clicking started again, closer. This time I stood up and backed against the wall, listening to it echo through the tunnel. Click, click. And then it stepped in. Crawling, it moved on. all fours, limbs bent in ways that didn't make sense, like joints were pointing the wrong direction. Its skin was pale and stretched thin over bone. No eyes, nose, no face at all. Just smooth skin with a thin slit where a mouth might have been. It held 2 small black stones in its hands. Click, click, click. Then it stopped moving. Tilted its head, dropped the stones, and screamed. Not with its mouth, the sound came from everywhere, as if the cave itself was screaming. A horrible metallic screech that rattled in my bones. My flashlight went out. I didn't wait to think I dropped it, and ran arms outstretched, crashing into rock, clawing through tight gaps, scrambling up slopes. My palms got shredded, knees bruised. I didn't care. I just kept moving, after what felt like forever. I saw a faint sliver of daylight up ahead. I forced myself through a crack in the rock and fell out onto the ridge. I didn't stop running until I reached the fire road, collapsed next to my car, and lay there for what had to be an hour, just listening, waiting. Eventually I drove home, but when I tried to find that post again, it was gone, deleted, no trace of it. The ranger station doesn't show up in any official records last October. I agreed to house sit for my cousin Jason while he and his girlfriend took a 2-week hiking trip out in Colorado. They'd been planning it for months, and when their original house sitter bailed, he asked if I could help. Said I could use the change of scenery. At the time I was 27, out of work, and back, living in my parents' basement, not exactly thriving, so the idea of spending a couple weeks in a quiet cabin, no obligations, just me and his dogs. It sounded like a break I desperately needed. Jason and Kayla lived way out in the Blue Ridge stretch of the Appalachians near a town called Clarksville. It's one of those places that doesn't show up unless you already know it exists. Their cabin sat about 20 minutes outside town, tucked back behind a couple switchbacks, one gravel road, and what felt like a million trees, the kind of place that disappears off the map once your signal drops, which it did. About halfway there, when I pulled in, Jason was already waiting out front with Sophie and Tank, his 2 dogs. Sophie was this lazy old golden retriever who looked like she had seen better years. Tank, on the other hand, was younger, a husky mixed with way too much energy and a stare that made you feel like he was judging everything you did. Jason gave me a piece of paper with all the important stuff, door codes, Wi-Fi password, and a couple backup instructions right before he left. He pointed around the side of the cabin and said, if the power goes out, which it does, sometimes the breaker's in the basement. You'll have to get to it through the storm doors, around back. Wait, I said, I thought this place was on a slab. He gave me this weird look like I just asked him if the sky was blue. Nah, it's dug in, but don't hang out down there. Foundation's old, and it gets damp. Just flip the breaker and come back up. Then, as he was walking to the car, he turned back and said, oh, and if you go walking, stay on the road, don't go into the woods. Some folks around here don't like it when people wander. I assumed he meant hunters or private property lines or something. The first few days were actually kind of great. Peaceful. I woke up late, fed the dogs, made pasta, read books I hadn't touched in years. The cabin was cozy, a little musty, but not in a gross way, more like it had stories it wasn't telling. There were these huge windows facing the woods, and during the day the sunlight cut through the trees and painted the walls in these slow-moving stripes. No noise out there, though, no birds, no crickets, just wind and creaks from the house at night. The silence hit different, not just quiet, total silence. I'd sit there sometimes and snap my fingers just to make a sound. Even the dogs didn't bark. They'd lie there, ears twitching like they were listening for something I couldn't hear. On the 4th night, I was halfway through some old movie when the lights cut out. No flickering, just this single soft click, like someone flicked a switch in another room. Everything went black. I waited maybe a minute, thinking it might come back nothing, so I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen, pulled on boots, and headed out the back door. The storm doors were heavier than they looked, metal ones with thick hinges that groaned. When I pulled them open, the stone steps going down were slick with moss and leaves. I held the flashlight low and watched my footing. About halfway down, something crunched under my boot. I paused and aimed the light down a tiny, dry-looking bone. I knelt and pushed some leaves aside and found more of them. Little vertebrae ribs, maybe a jaw picked completely clean. The breaker box looked fine. I flipped the main off, then on. Nothing happened. I stood there a second trying to decide whether I'd done it wrong when the dogs exploded into barking. Not just noise. They were in full-blown defense mode. Tank, especially his barks, echoed through the cabin like he was ready to rip something apart. I bolted up the steps, nearly slipping at the top, and rushed back inside. Both dogs were at the sliding. Glass door pressed up against it, their fur bristled teeth out. Tank let out this low, rumbling growl. Sophie stood frozen beside him, her ears flat against her head. I aimed the flashlight through the glass, and I froze. There were 2 handprints, not smears, actual handprints, perfect, greasy outlines pressed against the outside of the door, low to the ground, kid-sized, no thumbs, just 4 long fingers on each hand. I stepped back, stomach tight, heart thooting in my ears. Tank growled again, deeper this time, like he wanted to leap through the door. I cracked it open just an inch and called out, "Hey, who's out there?" "Nothing, just trees and dark." I stepped onto the porch and swept the flashlight left, then right. It flickered. I smacked it against my palm, and it steadied, still nothing. I went back inside and locked the door. That night, I didn't sleep. I dragged a chair into the hallway, sat facing the back door, and held a kitchen knife in my lap. Just waiting. By morning, the handprints were gone, and I don't mean faded, they were gone. The glass was spotless, like someone had come through with a microfiber cloth and wiped them away. I called Jason, told him everything. There was a pause. Then he said, "Sometimes locals mess with people. It's nothing. If they meant harm, they'd have done it already." He said it too flat, like he was reciting something that night. I kept the lights off, just me, the flashlight, and a thermos of tea around 11:30. I heard tapping, light random thumps on the roof, not like rain more, like pebbles being tossed from different angles. I stepped outside and aimed the light up, caught something moving just for a second, something small and quick, pulled back over the edge of the roof. "Hello." "Ah," I called. Then I heard it giving a whisper, high-pitched like a kid testing the sound of my name for the first time, damn long and soft like it didn't know what the word meant. I backed into the house and slammed the door locked. It sat down in the hallway again. The dogs didn't bark this time. They just whine. Next morning I climbed up to check the roof. More handprints, same size, 4 fingers, no thumbs. That was it for me. I packed everything, tossed in, dog food, grabbed a bag, loaded the dogs into Jason's truck. I was walking back to the kitchen to grab my charger when Tank growled. He stood stiff in front of the pantry, baring his teeth. Sophie crawled under the table and wouldn't come out. I tapped the wall behind the pantry hollow. I crouched down and spotted something I hadn't noticed before. A small crawl space hatch beneath the bottom shelf. I moved the shelf aside and opened it. The flashlight barely reached the far end, but what I could see made my skin crawl. Hundreds of scratches, thin, shallow. Grooves cut into the floorboards like tiny fingers had been dragging across them over and over again. The wood looked chewed up. I shut it. Called, "Jason, I'm leaving." I said, "Something's wrong here." He didn't argue, just asked, "Can you check the far corner of the crawl space before you go?" I left some traps there last winter. No, I told him. I'm not opening that thing again. He didn't press. I didn't go home that night. I drove straight to a motel off the highway, 20 m out, slept with the dogs on the bed and a chair wedged under the doorknob. I'm Jamie, and I was 24 when I did my first solo hike through the Blue Hollow Range, just up near the Tennessee-Georgia border. It wasn't some dramatic decision or part of a personal journey or whatever. People usually say, I wasn't chasing inner peace or running from demons. I'd just gotten laid off from this job. I didn't even like some dull office gig where the highlight of my day was watching the coffee machine clog and I didn't feel like answering questions or pretending I was okay. So I packed a bag and left town. I brought enough food for a few days, a tent, one of those burner phones you get at gas stations, a basic GPS that looked like it belonged in a pawn shop, and this old paper map with faded trails I printed off a hiking forum. No cell signal out there, which honestly felt like a plus at the time. First night was fine, peaceful. Actually, I set up near a stream with just enough space to hang my hammock between two trees, cook some saddle, looking ramen on my little stove, and listened to frogs making weird clicking noises while I stared at the water. There were a few distant cracks from the woods, twigs snapping, something shifting in the underbrush. But that's normal out there. It didn't bother me. In fact, it felt like the first time I'd heard silence that wasn't empty. The next morning I started hiking again, and maybe 6 miles in, I saw this old half-hidden path veering off to the left. It was mostly buried in undergrowth, but still walkable. I don't know. What made me turn? Boredom, maybe curiosity. It felt like one of those decisions you make without thinking too hard, like taking the long way home for no reason. The path curled down into a thicker patch of forest where the trees were packed tight, and the light barely made it through. There were no more trail markers, and the air felt still, like nothing had moved through in a while. Then I saw it, a collapsed structure just off to the side, cabin-shaped, but barely holding together. It looked like it had been there for decades. One whole side had sunk into the ground, and the roof had collapsed in like a crushed box, maybe 10 by 10 ft at most. No doors, just a hole where one probably used to be, and the windows were empty, just jagged edges where the frames had rotted away inside. Was this ancient rusted stove tipped on its side, and lying next to it, half buried in dirt, was a Polaroid. I wiped it off and looked closer. It was a photo of a man, shirtless, standing in front of that exact cabin. Same angle, same. Crooked frame visible in the background. The photo was faded, especially at the edges, but his face, dead center, was sharp. His eyes didn't seem to focus on anything. No expression, just a blank stare. Like he didn't even know the picture was being taken. I turned it over, no date, no name, just blank. I felt uneasy, not terrified or anything, just unsettled, like I'd stumbled into something private. I didn't step inside, just took a picture of the cabin with my phone, stuck the Polaroid in my pocket, and kept walking around 400. I found a decent camp spot, uphill from the cabin, maybe 50 or 60 yards away. I picked it specifically because the trees blocked the view of where I'd come from. I remember thinking, if I can't see it, it can't see me. That night I had trouble falling asleep. Not because of noises, there weren't any, but because of how quiet it was. No crickets, no wind, just that deep forest silence that makes you feel like you're the last person left on Earth sometime after two toner. I woke up suddenly, just shot awake, like I had heard something, but couldn't remember what. I lay there in the hammock, totally still. And that's when I noticed it was moving, not swaying gently from a breeze. It felt like someone had walked past and pushed it once, just enough to make it swing slightly and stop. I didn't move, just reached over and grabbed my flashlight, slowly flicked it on. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Then, after maybe 30 seconds, I heard it. Branches cracking somewhere downhill. Not close, but not far, either. Another crack, then silence again. I sat up and whispered, "Hello." No response. Then I heard it, a short cough, dry, like someone clearing their throat. But trying not to draw attention, it came from the direction of the cabin. I stayed frozen until the sky started getting light. Didn't sleep another second. When I finally got up, I scanned the area, and that's when I saw it. A footprint in the dirt, maybe 4 FT from where I'd slept. Barefoot. Big wide toes, no sign of shoes or tread. Just one clean print. Like whoever it was had stood there for a while before walking off. I didn't even eat. I packed up in silence and started following the map back toward the trail loop I'd planned. After a couple miles, I noticed the forest felt off. No birds, no buzzing insects, not even a breeze in the trees. Just me and my footsteps. That's when I started seeing the carvings. At first it was just lines, deep vertical slashes in the bark. But then the patterns got more specific. A spiral inside, a square, a cross that bent at weird angles, almost like symbols. I passed maybe 7 or 8 trees. With different carvings, they looked too deliberate to be graffiti, too old to be part of some recent hiker's prank. Then I saw the face carved into the trunk of a big oak, long oval, eyes, a stretched mouth turned down. It wasn't messy. It had detail enough to look like someone had spent time on it that made it worse. I pulled out my phone to take a photo. That's when I saw him behind the next tree, just standing there still, as a statue, shirtless, skin pale like wax. He was partially hidden by the trunk, but I could see his face. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just stared right at me, like he'd been waiting. I don't remember turning around. I just know I ran full speed. No idea where I was going, just pure panic. I ducked behind a massive fallen log, crouched down and waited. No sounds, no running footsteps. Just quiet after maybe 15 minutes. I got moving again. But I didn't go back toward the trail. I started cutting west, using my compass, hoping to find a road or anything man-made. Around noon, I found a clearing. And another cabin. This one was different. Newer roof, solid. A thin stream of smoke was rising from something behind it. Animal hides were hanging from a line out front, and tools were scattered across a wooden table. I don't know why I got closer, but I did. I moved real slow, staying in the trees. Then I caught the smell, burned meat, thick, greasy, clinging to the back of my throat. There was a metal drum near the porch, and smoke was rolling from under the lid. I crept up and peeked inside. Bones, big, wrong-shaped, not deer or bear or something, about the structure of them, made my stomach twist. I backed up fast and nearly tripped over a root. That's when I heard the cabin door crack open. I didn't wait to see who stepped out. I ran so hard I couldn't feel my feet, crossed a dry creek bed, clawed my way up a slope, using tree roots and rocks, and didn't stop until I hit the top ridge and saw nothing behind me, still silent, still wrong. I kept walking until night fell again. That's when I spotted the hunting stand. Nailed into a tree, it was high, maybe 30 feet up, but I didn't care. I climbed it faster than I thought I could. The platform was barely big enough to sit on, but I huddled there, wrapped my coat around me, and waited around midnight. I heard it footsteps, slow, one step at a time, through the leaves, getting closer. Then a voice, flat calm, like someone reading a name off a list. My skin went ice cold. Then again, Jamie. Then I heard the ladder creak step by step. Something was climbing. I gripped my knife, my hand shaking so hard I could barely hold it. When the figure reached the top, I didn't wait to see his face. I swung with my foot hard. My boot hit him square in the chest, and he fell backward. I heard the impact when he landed, then nothing. I jumped off the back of the stand. My ankle twisted bad when I landed. The pain was sharp, immediate. But I didn't stop. I crawled, then limped through the woods for hours. No direction, just moving. Eventually, I saw headlights. A truck was coming, slowed down a dirt road, stepped right into its path. The driver slammed the brakes and jumped out yelling, "I collapsed by the front bumper." He asked if someone was chasing me. I just nodded. Didn't say a word about the photo next morning. I burned the Polaroid. Didn't even look at it again.